She said, "You changed," but I think she just found someone who made her feel new again. For a second I just stared at her, my fingers still curled around the mug I hadn't actually taken a sip from in 10 minutes. The coffee had gone lukewarm and developed that thin skin on top, but I couldn't move. Her suitcase was by the door, half-zipped, the corner of her denim jacket sticking out like it was trying to escape. My own reflection blinked back at me from the dark TV screen behind her, and I had this absurd out-of-body moment where I watched myself sitting there in my worn grey hoodie, jaw clenched, while she stood in the same living room where we'd slow danced in socks and painted the walls. "You changed," she'd said, and I could see her waiting for me to argue, to protest, to beg. My heart was thudding so hard it made my throat feel tight, but what came out of my mouth was, "Yeah, I did." Her eyes flickered like I'd stepped off the script. She shifted her weight from one leg to the other, arms crossing over the oversized shirt she was wearing, the one I recognized from photos, the one that wasn't mine. The apartment smelled like rain from the open window and the faint citrus of her shampoo. I felt my knee bouncing against the table leg, felt the tiny tremor in my hand as I finally set the mug down a little too carefully, like if I put it down wrong it would be one more thing I'd be accused of breaking. "Don't do that," she said quietly. "Don't take responsibility like it was some decision we made together. You're different, Noah, you are, that's all I'm trying to say." Her voice cracked on different, and she pressed her lips together like she could keep everything else from spilling out. It was a Sunday afternoon in late August, and we'd been together for 7 years, married for 2 and a bit. I'm 32, she's 30. I'm Noah, by the way, she's Emma. We live in a 1-bedroom apartment above a pharmacy on a street that's always either too quiet or too loud, depending on whether you're trying to sleep. I work in software, one of those boring-sounding jobs that pay okay but make people's eyes glaze over when you explain it. She's a photographer. When people hear that, they always do the "oh, that's so cool" thing, and it is. It was for a long time. We met the way you meet people in your early 20s, badly and by accident. I was 24, freshly dropped out of my second attempt at uni, working nights at a bar that mostly served cheap cocktails to students and middle-aged divorcees. I was the guy who remembered your drink order and pretended to care about your breakup story because tips. Emma walked in one Friday night with 2 friends, camera slung over her shoulder even in that setting. I remember noticing that first, a battered Canon in a place where everyone else was carrying clutches or tote bags. "What can I get you?" I asked, leaning on the bar. She squinted up at the messy chalkboard menu. "What's your least embarrassing cocktail?" "None of them," I said, "but I can make you something that won't be neon blue." She grinned, "Dealer's choice, then." I made her a whiskey sour. She took a sip, eyebrows lifting. "This is actually good. You sure you're in the right place?" I shrugged. Bad decisions have to start somewhere. She laughed, and it was this loud, unself-conscious sound that hit me straight in the chest. We ended up talking between orders, her about the photography course she was finishing, me about dropping out of computer science because I didn't see the point and hated the structure. She teased me about being a cliché, aimless bartender with a mysterious creative side. I wrote music back then, mostly half-finished lyrics in notebooks. I told her she was a cliché too, art student with bangs and opinions about film. We exchanged numbers when she left, scribbled on the back of a receipt because my phone had died. She texted the next day. "Emma, does the aimless bartender want to get coffee somewhere that is sticky?" From the beginning, I was the one floating and she was the one with a direction, even if she didn't have a map. She was hustling, shooting gigs on weekends, editing until 2 a.m., dreaming about a studio space she couldn't afford yet. I was closing up the bar at 3 a.m., sleeping until noon, and lying to myself about figuring it out. Here's the thing though, she liked that version of me. Or at least she said she did. She liked that I was chill and present. I didn't have a 5-year plan. If she texted at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday, there was a decent chance I was awake and free to meet her in the park. When she had a last-minute idea for a shoot involving fairy lights and a rooftop, I could say yes without checking a calendar. We moved in together after a year and a half. It wasn't this big planned thing. Her share house was being sold, my roommate got engaged and moved out, and suddenly us sharing a place made more sense than both of us scrambling. We found a dodgy little unit over a laundromat. The ceiling leaked once and the oven only worked on incinerate, but we made it ours. We painted one wall a ridiculous teal. We strung photos and Polaroids up on twine. We ate takeaway on the floor because the table took 3 weeks to arrive. Back then, change meant new furniture and new Spotify playlists. Not whatever this is. I didn't wake up one day and decide to be a different person. It was quieter than that, a slow accumulation of tiny embarrassments. A customer at the bar recognizing me from 2 years earlier and saying, "Man, you're still here." My mum asking during a rare phone call if I'd thought about going back to study, yet in that careful tone that meant she'd been thinking about it a lot. Emma coming home from a 12-hour wedding shoot, collapsing onto the bed, and saying, "I don't know how long I can keep doing this if it doesn't stabilize," while I sat there wondering what I'd actually done that week besides sleep badly and pour drinks. It wasn't that she pressured me. That's important. She never did the "when are you going to get a real job" thing. If anything, she defended me when other people made comments. "He's figuring it out," she'd say. "He's not hurting anyone." But hearing someone else say you're figuring it out long enough makes you realize you're not, actually. You're just drifting. The real turning point came one night after a fight about dishes that wasn't actually about dishes. It was after midnight. I'd just gotten home from a shift, dumped my bag on the chair, and found the sink full. "Didn't we say we'd try to keep on top of this?" I'd said, tired and sharp. She looked up from her laptop, dark circles under her eyes. "I shot for 10 hours today," she'd said. "I got home, backed up files, ate something, and started editing because the client would love a sneak peek ASAP. I'm sorry I didn't also audition for MasterChef." I snapped something back, I don't even remember what. Something about "we're both busy and you're not the only one who's tired." It escalated the way those tired fights do, fast and stupid. At one point she said, "You don't even know if you're going to be at that bar in 6 months. How can I plan anything with you?" And then instantly clapped a hand over her mouth like she wanted to shove the sentence back in. We slept back to back that night, the air between us thick and stale. In the morning, she'd apologized, eyes red. "I didn't mean it like that," she'd said. "I'm just stressed." But the thing was, she wasn't wrong. That was the worst part. 2 weeks later, I applied for a junior dev role at a small software company a friend of a friend mentioned. It wasn't glamorous. The pay was only slightly better than bartending, but it was daytime, and it was something that used the half-finished degree I'd always been half ashamed of abandoning. When I got the call saying I'd got the job, Emma whooped so loud the neighbor's dog barked. She jumped on me, legs around my waist, nearly knocking us both over. "I knew it," she said into my neck. "I knew someone would see how smart you are." We went out for cheap dumplings that night and toasted with Tsingtao. She took a photo of me holding my beer up, eyes a little shiny, and captioned it on Instagram. "So proud of this one. That version of you changed was good. Fun. We both got novelty out of it. I started getting up before noon. I bought shirts that didn't have the bar logo on them. I learned to use words like deployment and sprint unironically." The shifts in our life seemed at first like upgrades. We moved into a slightly nicer apartment. Hello, current pharmacy neighbors. We got a joint account. Emma's photography picked up. She landed a couple of regular clients, started renting a studio space part-time. We had date nights on Fridays because weekends got busy with her shoots and my occasional on-call. The thing about change, though, is that it never happens cleanly. You don't upgrade one part of your life without the others rearranging themselves around it, and we didn't have the language for that. We just sort of tried to drag the old us into the new structure and act confused when things didn't fit. In the old days, if Emma messaged me at 2 in the afternoon saying, "The light's amazing, want to meet me by the pier and be my test subject," 9 times out of 10 I could go. Now I'd look at my calendar full of stand-ups and code reviews and be like, "I can maybe do after 6. "I'll miss the light," she'd say, not accusing, just statting. "I know," I'd reply, feeling like I'd failed a test I hadn't known was happening. We talked about it a little. "I'm so proud of you," she'd say when I came home flushed with the small victories of learning a new system or nailing a solution. "You're killing it." "Am I boring now?" I'd ask, half joking, when I'd bail on a spontaneous midweek gig because I had an early meeting. She'd kiss my forehead and say, "You could never be boring," and I believed her. Mostly. We got married after I'd been at the job just over a year. It wasn't a big shift from our day-to-day. We'd basically been living like a married couple anyway, but it felt like a milestone. A ceremony. We wrote our own vows. I promised not to make jokes when she was crying. She promised to always show me good light. Everyone cried more than we expected. Looking back, if I had to pinpoint when the drift started, I'd say it was sometime in year 2 of marriage, year 3 of my job. It wasn't dramatic. You'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. That's kind of the point, I guess. Emma started getting more commercial work, brands wanting authentic lifestyle shots, cafes wanting social media content. It paid better than weddings, but it also seemed to suck some joy out of her. She'd come home from a day of shooting avocado toast and say, "If I have to photograph one more latte from above, I'm going to throw myself into traffic." I tried to help. "You can always say no to stuff," I'd say, reheating leftovers. "Take more of the arty jobs." "Arty jobs don't pay the rent," she'd reply, staring at her calendar. My own job got busier too. Our startup got acquired by a bigger company. Suddenly there were all-hands meetings and performance reviews and opportunities for growth. I got promoted. I got stock options I didn't fully understand. People started asking when I was going to step up to management. I started listening to podcasts about productivity. I read books with titles like Atomic Habits and Essentialism. I tracked my sleep, my steps, my macros. I went to therapy for the first time in my life and realized, with a slow kind of horror, how much of my chillness was actually just avoidance. When I came home from sessions, I'd be raw and hyper-aware of every pattern in the house. How Emma shut down when I asked certain questions. How I filled silence with plans. "I think I've been coasting," I told her one night, lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, just letting life happen instead of making choices. She snorted. "You, the man with 3 budgeting apps and a spreadsheet for our holidays. You know what I mean," I said, emotionally. She went quiet. "I don't know how to be any other way," she said eventually. "We just do what we have to do, right?" Therapy made me want to talk more, about us, about what we wanted. It made her want to talk less. Not because she's a villain, I need to say that. She grew up in a house where feelings were like dirty laundry. You hid them when company came over. So I started changing. Or maybe I started noticing that I wanted to. I drank less. I stayed later at work when we had deadlines, because it mattered to me in a way bartending never had. I started putting money aside not just because I should, but because I actually cared about future me not living in fear of his car breaking down. I also stopped saying yes to every last-minute, chaotic plan. If we had something scheduled and she texted an hour beforehand saying, "Oh, Hannah wants to grab dinner, can we move our thing?" I started saying no, "I've been looking forward to tonight." "You never used to be so rigid," she said once, not quite joking. "You never used to cancel on me so much," I said back, trying to keep my voice level. We started orbiting each other instead of colliding. Same apartment, different gravitational pulls. Enter Alex. Alex was, I still don't know how to describe him without sounding petty. He was one of her clients at first, technically. He owned a small chain of boutique gyms, those places that look like someone crossbred a warehouse with an Instagram feed. Exposed brick, plants, barista coffee in the lobby. He hired Emma to refresh the brand images. "He's actually really nice," she said after their first meeting. "Not like those sleazeball gym bros. He cares about the vibe. I met him once at a launch thing. He had that specific kind of charisma that makes you feel like you're in a commercial when you talk to him. Handshake just the right amount of firm. Eye contact. Laugh a little too loud at your jokes." He complimented Emma's work in a way that made her blush and roll her eyes at the same time. "Dude's intense," I said on the ride home, stretching my neck. "He's passionate," she said. "It's his business." "Yeah," I said, "so is a cult." She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. After that, the name Alex started popping up more. "Alex wants to do another shoot next month. Alex thinks my rates are too low and that I should own my value. Alex said he's opening another space across town and wants me on board from the start." I didn't think much of it at first. I was genuinely happy she'd found a client who paid reliably and valued her work. But then they started workshopping ideas over coffee. They started texting late because he's always up planning. She started going to his gym because it's good networking and I get a discount. I remember the first time I saw a message that made my stomach drop. We were watching a movie on the couch, her feet under my leg. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She leaned forward, glanced at it, and this small, involuntary smile tugged at her mouth. "You going to share with the class?" I joked. She snatched the phone up too quickly. "It's just Alex," she said. "He sent a stupid meme." "Oh," I said, "I didn't ask to see. I wish I'd been dumber and just let it go." Instead, my brain, recently trained to be curious about your feelings, started poking at the jealousy. It wasn't just that he existed. It was the way she talked about herself when she talked about him. There was this spark. "Sometimes I feel like he sees me, you know," she said once out of nowhere while we brushed our teeth. "Not just as the photographer, but as whatever I am." I spat foam into the sink. "What do you think I see?" I asked, trying to keep it light. She blinked, caught out. "You see all of me," she said quickly. "Obviously, I didn't mean it like that." I nodded, rinsed my mouth, pretended it didn't land like a stone in my gut. The actual proof, when it came, was almost boring in its predictability. It was a Wednesday night. She said she had a late edit to finish and was going to work from the studio. I'd stayed late at the office, then grabbed cheap Thai on the way home. Around 9, I realized I hadn't heard from her. I sent a casual. "Meet you alive." No response. At 10, a message came through. "Emma still at the studio. Might crash on the couch here, I'm wrecked. X." Something about it didn't sit right. She never crashed at the studio. It didn't even have a shower. It was in a dodgy part of town she always said creeped her out at night. I stared at the message for a while. Then, and I still don't fully know why, I opened my laptop, logged into the account we used to share for her business expenses, the one that synced her card transactions for tax time. We have always been catastrophically lazy about logging out of things. There it was. 9:12 p.m. Merchant, Bean and Barrel Wine Bar, $46. The wine bar was nowhere near her studio. It was, however, 2 blocks from Alex's flagship gym. I sat very still, watching the cursor blink in the search bar like it was mocking me. My chest felt hot and cold at the same time. A part of me said, don't go there. Don't turn into the guy who tracks his wife's movements. Another part of me, the one that had spent months being told to listen to my own alarms instead of gaslighting myself, said, screw that. I grabbed my keys. The wine bar was one of those dimly lit places where the tables are too close together and the menu uses words like notes and mouthfeel. I stood across the street for a full minute, debating whether I was insane. Just as I was about to turn around and go home, the door opened. She stepped out, laughing at something, hair thrown back. She looked lighter than I'd seen her in months. Next to her was Alex, hand on her elbow, not in an overtly sexual way, just that casual possessiveness people have when they're used to touching someone. They walked down the street together, close but not quite touching. I followed at a distance like the world's worst private detective, hatting myself every step. Maybe they'd just had a working drink. Maybe they'd say goodbye on the corner, a polite hug, separate Ubers. They turned the corner onto a smaller side street. I sped up, heart hammering. When I rounded the corner, I saw them nearest the mouth of an alleyway, partially lit by a flickering street lamp. She said something I couldn't hear. He laughed, and then he cupped her face and kissed her. There was this weird, sharp moment where the world went high definition. The texture of the brick wall, the way her hand curled into his jacket, the tiny, stupid detail of a no parking sign behind them. I remember thinking, I'm going to be stuck with this image forever and that's the best the universe could give me. She didn't pull away, she leaned into it. I don't know how long I stood there. It could have been 5 seconds, it could have been a minute. Eventually, a car turned into the street and its headlights swung over all of us. I flinched like I'd been caught, even though I was the one being betrayed. They broke apart. She glanced up, and for a split second our eyes met across the road. Her expression did this wild, complicated thing, shock, guilt, fear, something almost like relief, and then her face went white. Noah, she mouthed. I turned around and walked away. I don't remember the journey home. I know I didn't run because my legs felt like a dream where you're moving through syrup. I must have driven because my car was back in our spot later, but I have no memory of the lights or the turns. My brain had shoved me into some emergency mode. Just get home, just get inside, collapse later. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark, the ticking of the old clock on the wall suddenly very loud. At some point, I became aware that my hands were shaking. I put them flat on the table to stop them. It didn't help. The front door opened quietly around midnight. Noah, she said, voice small. In here, I replied. My voice sounded like someone else. She walked in, keys still in her hand. Her eyes were red, mascara smudged. She looked like she'd been crying. Before you say anything, she blurted, I am so sorry. I fucked up. You said you were at the studio, I said, cutting her off. I was, she said. And then Alex texted and said he was nearby and did I want to talk about the shoot, and I should have said no. I know. But you didn't, I said. No, she whispered. And then you kissed him. Her shoulders sagged, yes. Or he kissed you and you didn't stop it. That doesn't make it better, she said quickly. No, I said, it doesn't. I'd always thought in some abstract way that if I ever caught a partner cheating, I'd be dramatic. Yell, throw something, demand details I didn't actually want. Instead, I just felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left the shell. The first conversation was all adrenaline and apologies, and her saying, over and over, it just happened until I finally snapped and said, you don't just trip and fall mouth first onto someone. She flinched. I know, she said. I know, I'm not trying to make excuses. I've been so unhappy, Noah, for so long, and I didn't know how to say it without sounding like an asshole. Asshole would have been preferable to liar, I said, just for future reference. We didn't figure anything out that night. We just cried and circled each other verbally until we were both exhausted. She slept in the spare room, which we used to call the office even though it was mostly boxes and a dying plant. I lay in our bed alone, staring at the ceiling and thought, okay, this is it. This is one of those fork-in-the-road moments. Over the next few days, we did the dance I'd seen other couples do from the outside, the maybe we can fix this waltz, that we owe it to our history to try shuffle. She sent a text to Alex in front of me, saying she couldn't work with him anymore, couldn't see him. He replied with something vomit-inducing about respecting her boundaries and being here if she needed to talk. We booked an emergency therapist appointment. Sitting in that beige room, on that couch that had probably seen decades of relationship car crashes, I listened to Emma talk about how lost she felt, how left behind when I started doing all this internal work and she felt stuck, how she'd been scared to tell me my newfound structure made her feel like she was living in a spreadsheet instead of a life. You used to be light, she said, twisting a tissue in her hands. You used to say yes to things. You used to write songs and stay up talking until 3 a.m. Now you're in bed by 10 because your sleep tracker told you performed better with 8 hours. You're efficient, optimized, and I know that's good. I know it's healthy, but I miss the old you. I stared at her. The old me was depressed and directionless, I said. The old me drank too much and avoided his feelings and had panic attacks about bank statements. The old me made you carry the mental load of everything because he was too busy being chill to care. You hated that version of me, remember? I didn't hate him, she said. He stressed me out sometimes, but he was present. So am I said. I'm here. I'm literally here trying to talk to you about us. She looked away. You're here, she said, but you're always half in your head, planning, analyzing, fixing. I feel like a project you're managing, not a person you're with. The therapist let the silence sit for a moment. Noah, she said gently, what's it like to hear that? It was like being told the life raft you, so carefully built, is the thing that made someone jump overboard. I tried to own my part. Really, months of therapy hadn't been for nothing. I could see, in a detached way, how my reaction to my own chaos had been to swing too hard in the other direction. How I'd started treating our relationship like code I could debug if I just found the right variable. What I couldn't accept was the idea that my change had forced her hand into someone else's mouth. You could have told me, I said in that session. You could have said, I miss the mess, I miss spontaneity, I miss you. Instead, you told him. She cried harder. I was scared, she said. You've been doing all this work on yourself, and I didn't want to be the one saying, hey, your progress is making me uncomfortable. It made me feel shallow, like I didn't deserve you. So you found someone you felt like you did deserve, I said. Someone who saw you as what? New, exciting, untethered. She didn't answer, she didn't have to. We tried for a bit, we really did. No more Alex, more us time. Less productivity podcast for me, more creative time for her. We scheduled dates which felt both necessary and slightly tragic. We had sex that wasn't just we should probably have sex. There were glimmers of the old us, laughing in the kitchen, taking a random Sunday drive. But something fundamental had cracked. Trust, yes, but also the narrative. I couldn't unhear you changed, spoken as an accusation. She couldn't unknow what it felt like to be looked at by someone who didn't know all her anxious habits and burnt-out parts. A few months later, we had the conversation that ended with the half-packed suitcase by the door and her saying, he makes me feel new. She didn't use his name, but we both knew who she meant. I'm not in love with him, she said, standing by the window, arms wrapped around herself. I'm not leaving you for him. I'm leaving because I don't like who I am in this version of us, and I don't know how to become someone different without starting over. You could start over with me, I said, hatting how desperate it sounded. She shook her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. Every time I look at you, I see the person I hurt, she said. I see the guy I cheated on, the guy who watched me kiss someone else. I see your spreadsheets and your effort and your disappointment. I don't see freedom, I don't see possibility. Freedom, I repeated, the word bitter in my mouth. Possibility, that's what you call it when you're about to go make the same mistakes with someone new. Maybe, she said with a sad half smile, maybe I will, maybe I'm chasing a high that doesn't exist, but I can't. I can't stay here and resent you for getting your shit together. That's worse. So when you say, you changed, I said slowly, what you mean is, you stopped playing the role I expect you to play in my story. She flinched, that's not. It kind of is, I said. She didn't deny it again. We stood there for a long time, the space between us full of 7 years of shared grocery lists, and inside jokes and hospital visits and family funerals, and all the little mundane things that make up a life. I do love you, she said finally. That's not a line, I really do, I just don't want this life. The one we're building. The one where we keep being older versions of the kids we were when we met, polishing the furniture while quietly choking. Then go find your new again, I said, surprising myself with how steady it came out. Just don't pretend you're leaving because I changed. We both did. You just liked your story better when I was lost. Her face crumpled. "That's not fair," she said. "Maybe not," I said, "but it's what it feels like from over here." She left that afternoon, took the suitcase and the denim jacket and her favorite mug, left behind a houseplant, a drawer full of random camera batteries, and a husband halfway between heartbreak and reluctant relief. It's been 10 months. We're not in each other's lives anymore in any meaningful way. We did the admin, separated finances, split the books and furniture, told our families separately so they wouldn't make it worse. She moved into a share house in a different part of the city. I kept the apartment above the pharmacy because, weirdly, the routine anchored me. I changed the teal wall back to white. That hurt more than I thought it would. People always want the gossip. Are they together? They ask, meaning her and him. As far as I know, yes. I muted her on social media, but mutual friends talk. Apparently they're taking it slow, whatever that means when you've already detonated a marriage in the blast radius. They go to outdoor markets and post black and white photos with captions about growth and choosing joy. Sometimes I hate them a little. Sometimes I don't think about them at all. Both feel like progress. As for me, I still work in software. I still see my therapist. I drink a bit more than I should some weeks and then swing back the other way. I got rid of some of the more intense tracking apps, kept the ones that actually help. I started going to an open mic again with an old friend, dug out some of my old songs, wrote new ones that don't sound like the person I was at 24 or 29, but some messy hybrid of both. I'm trying to learn how to change without turning into someone unrecognizable to myself, to let some chaos back in without torching my own stability. It's slow. Some days I get it right. I say yes to last-minute drinks with coworkers and no to working late for no reason. Other days I crash on the couch at 8 p.m. with a spreadsheet open and only realize I haven't spoken out loud since I left the office when I say shit at a bad email. I think a lot about that sentence, "You changed." It's become one of those phrases people spit when what they really mean is, "You stopped being who I needed you to be to keep my own illusions intact." It's not that I didn't change. I did. I'm glad I did. I don't miss being the guy who pretended the future was a conspiracy. But I wish we'd had the courage earlier to admit that growing up together doesn't always mean growing in the same direction. I also think about the second half of the line, the bit I didn't say out loud that day, but that runs like a quiet subtitle in my head. I think she just found someone who made her feel new again. That's not an insult as much as it sounds like one. Newness is intoxicating. Being seen by someone who doesn't know all your patterns yet is intoxicating. I get why she chased it. I get why, standing in front of a life that suddenly looked like an endless stretch of responsible choices, she panicked and sprinted towards the nearest mirror that showed her a younger, freer version of herself. The part that hurts isn't that she wanted that feeling. It's that she didn't trust me enough to say, "Hey, I miss the version of me who danced in the kitchen and stayed up too late. Can we find her together?" She decided I'd become the warden of her adulthood and went looking for a jailbreak. I've stopped beatifying our relationship. For a while after the break, I swung hard into nostalgia, editing out all the crap and replaying only the highlight reel. The picnics, the road trips. The nights we lay on the floor listening to music. It made her leaving feel like an ungrateful twist in a perfect story. Therapy, annoyingly, made me admit the story was already fraying. We'd been drifting long before there was another man. We were just too scared to look down and see the gap. If you're reading this because you searched something like "partner said I changed and ended up doomscrolling," I don't really have any clean advice. Just some things I'm still trying to hold at the same time. You're allowed to grow, even if it makes other people uncomfortable, even if it disrupts the roles you used to play. They're allowed to decide they don't like who they are in the new version of the relationship. That doesn't mean they're allowed to lie and cheat their way out of it. Black circle being someone's new or they're alive again high is not a sustainable job description, for them or for you. Eventually, new becomes normal, and if neither of you can stomach that, you'll both keep burning lives down for the thrill. Mostly I'm trying to be less afraid of being told I've changed, because I will. I'd like next time to be with someone who hears you've changed and says, "Yeah, me too, let's see who we've become together," instead of reaching for the first person who makes them feel like they're back at the start of the movie. Until then, it's me, my weird little life, the whir of the pharmacy shutters going up at 8 a.m., the barista downstairs who knows my order, and a version of myself I'm still getting to know. He's not brand new. He's not the old me either. He's just here, changing, and for now that has to be enough.